This podcast sheds light on the incredible stories of those who served and are now navigating civilian life. Join me as we explore the challenges, triumphs, and unique perspectives of transitioning veterans. From career shifts to mental health, we cover everything. Subscribe now and amplify the voices of our heroes. Amplify Veterans, where every story matters. This is another episode of Amplify Veterans. Here today with Patrick Morgan. He's a veteran of the U.S. Army. He's going to talk today about his time in the service and a little bit about his transition experience. So I'm going to give the floor to you, Patrick. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Like I said, I'm Patrick Morgan, an Army veteran. I was in just over 3 years, did one initial contract and then separated out in 2014. So next year will be 10 years out, which is kind of a milestone, but we're surviving, so everything's good.
That is a big milestone. Congrats to you.
Thank you. So I enlisted in 2011, and I originally, I was in college and kind of struggling and didn't really have a path and didn't really know what I wanted to study or what I wanted to do in life. So naturally, kind of my whole life, I was drawn towards the military. My parents, at the time were like, maybe you should just focus on school. And that's something if you want to do after you get out and you want to, go the officer route, maybe do that. But you should focus on school. And I did.
And that's what every parent wants.
Yeah. And so, naturally my parents gave me wise advice and I didn't listen. But I was, 19 or whatever at the time. And so I ended up going over to the recruiter and, talking through options with them. And that was something where it was, take the ASVAB, get a really good score, get some sort of transitional, skill that you can apply later in life. And so naturally I enlisted as an infantryman and didn't go that route.
Any other, so, and I didn't mean to cut you off there. Was there any other jobs that you were interested in, or did you want to be an infantryman? Is that what you wanted?
That's what I wanted. But I did kind of look at other things. Like I think initially thinking back, I think like Patriot Missile Systems technician was like something that they were pitching to me. And I was like, yeah, okay, that sounds good. That's technical. I can probably have some, transferable knowledge later in life to use. But I ultimately was just like hung up on the infantry. It's what I wanted to do. It seemed like the most, to me, like that's the most true Army experience was like being an infantryman. So naturally, that's what I did. I enlisted as that and went off to basic training at Fort Benning, good old Sand Hill, and completed that and then went to airborne school and then completed that. So when I graduated there, I came down on orders to Italy. So that was my first and only duty station was in Italy, which as a 20 or 21-year-old kid was kind of a wild experience.
Yeah, I can't imagine Italy. I've never been. That sounds like such a beautiful place to be. What was your favorite part of Italy?
I think just kind of like immersing yourself in the culture, right? At a young age, you're kind of, I think speaking is kind of just like Americans as a whole, we're kind of confined to, the United States and we kind of see how things work here and we kind of adopt that and just to kind of open your eyes to the rest of the world and how they live and their culture and everything like that really kind of at a young age was a really cool thing. And that was like probably my favorite part about the duty station in Italy. I loved the unit because the unit was very small. It was like a brigade size unit. So it felt very much like you knew everybody. It was a very small base. So that was like a really interesting thing for me. And everybody that I served with over there that had been somewhere else was like, this isn't like the big army, right? This is very much like a tight knit community. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody's looking out for each other. And so that was like a very interesting thing. And like my only regret was like I never went to another duty station and saw the big army. But I'm sure if I did, I probably would have been like, yeah, I absolutely got to get out.
Yeah. So, how many people do you think were on the base with you in your command?
Let's see. So there's probably 100, give or take, in a company, and so I think there were 5 companies in our battalion, and then we had like CTAF, which was like the U.S. Army Africa Command was there. So I would say like maybe 1,000 people on base, like, and half of them were actually in our battalion, and probably 1,000, something like that. But then they ended up like the whole brigade element. It was kind of split, so like half of it was in Germany and half was in Italy. And so then they ended up building a new base in Vicenza, and they moved the rest of the brigade down. But my whole time was spent on the old base, which I liked better anyways. It had older facilities and stuff, but it was like what you were used to, and the commissary and everything was there, so it was nice. But yeah, not a very big element. Certainly not like Fort Bliss or anything, which I assume has like 25,000 soldiers on it. I have no idea. So that was the interesting part over there.
I'm always curious about the mission behind the different locations where the military is. I know obviously we want to show our force and we want to make sure that we're spreading freedom and democracy around the world. That's always an important thing. Was there anything specific that this command was in charge of? Anything that, I guess, the culture of the command, was there something very targeted that everybody focused on there?
Yeah, so I think for us, being in a unique location, certainly we were kind of always, like a quick reaction force to kind of anything in that part of the world. That certainly involved Africa, North Africa, right, parts of the Middle East, and then kind of what would be considered like the Eastern Bloc, which I think in my time, I have a hard time kind of remembering, but I think that was like the initial Russia invasion of Crimea, which was like a hot topic at the time. And I think right as I was transitioning out, our unit deployed to like some station over there that was like, hey, we got to put troops over here just in case. And so it was kind of always, we were always like the whatever the hotbed at the time was, we were always like keeping an eye on it and being ready to go. And at times it was like you were on 24-hour notice, things like that. But that was kind of the overall mission of our unit, was kind of to be a light infantry force deployable by air if need be, right? An airborne unit, and to kind of monitor those situations that were going on in that part of the world. So, and then obviously, deployments to Afghanistan at the time. I think right when I got in, we kind of pulled out of Iraq, so that wasn't on the table anymore. I think Syria was still kind of bubbling, and putting troops in Syria wasn't really a thing yet, but Afghanistan was still well underway. So we did that, and interesting. An interesting life experience.
Very much so. You were ready to go. You guys were ready to answer the call if it came, and that's the main reason you were located there.
Yep.
Got it. How was, I guess, as you got to the end of your tour, what was your transition experience like, or what was the TAP program like?
Yeah, so at some point I had realized, that I wasn't going to re-enlist. I wasn't going to stay in. And I had, informed everybody in my command that was like, hey, my time's up when it's time to ETS and I get out. So, you enroll in all the program. I guess I can't remember exactly what it was called, but that's what it was. And that was like a thing. I think it was several weeks long, and I went a couple times a week to like, a classroom and talked all about, getting a plan together, get your finances correct, things like that in terms of basic transition skills. But I didn't really fully have a plan. I just knew that a long-term career in the Army wasn't in my cards. So naturally, I was drawn to like getting out and using the GI Bill and kind of picking up where I initially left off, which was figure out what I want to study, go back to school, and go from there. But I know when we spoke previously, I talked about like I was transitioning out to a good support group, like my family, all very close, all still around. So I was getting out and I knew I had like some level of resources and help that would be provided to me in terms of like, okay, I can get out, I can go home, I can regroup and then, kind of get a plan. And I don't think that's always the case. So
Definitely
I
not
think,
always the case. It's
yeah,
good. It's good that you had that.
yeah. And so that would be like my first cautionary tale to people is, I maybe slacked a little bit on the transition, right? I knew that I didn't have to have it all figured out. I just knew that it was like, this isn't what I want to do. But I would caution people transitioning out of the military to start thinking, 24 months out, but from like your ETS date and start really trying to drill down what you want to do and start driving a plan to achieve that. And a lot of times that can, there can be a lot of things if you don't have any resources available to you, or as simple as like, I don't know where I'm going to live when I get out, right? I think a lot of times that can be a serious question. It's like, where do I go? Do I go back to where I started? Do I pick somewhere new and start fresh? How do I find an apartment, right? Like in the middle of an op tempo that could be crazy or whatever. So I think that's the first thing. Extend that window where you're like, I'm ETSing. That needs to be 18 to 24 months and be like, okay, start developing a plan now and take care of really everything that needs to be taken care of, which me as an infantryman didn't do.
And so you in your total length of commitment was 2 years?
Three and
Three
like
years.
change. Yeah.
Okay. And so imagine if your enlistment was 4 or 5 years,
Hmm.
would you still think 18 to 24 months or sooner?
I would still think 18 to 24 months. I think, I mean, I think if you start thinking about it at that point in time, right, and then understanding your situation, right, and maybe you think about it 18 months out, and you're like, I really only need 6 months here to dial in a place to live. But like if you're getting out and you got to apply to schools and things like that, there's always that window, right, where it's like, well, I'm getting out in December. It's like, okay, well, the period to apply schools, if that's the route you're going to go, is like isn't open at that time. So what are you going to do for 6 months, right, or whatever, right? And so kind of just getting all of those like timelines, overlapping where you have everything in line, I think is the key. So think about it 18 months out or whatever, and then develop your plan based on that. And then I think that should allow you enough time.
Yeah, I agree. I think you need to spend some time consciously thinking about what that next step is going to be. Some
Mm-hmm.
people know right away this isn't for me. Like, when would you say you figured out this is not the long term thing for you?
I would say uh, when I when I got back from Afghanistan. I think our unit was kind of like our operational tempo is going to die way down. It's going to go kind of back to I would call just like garrison lifestyle, where it was just like very much a grind in training with at like a high level, like no intention to deploy to combat again. And it's not like it just felt like to me, it was like, okay, well, what is the plan then? If I'm just here doing training rotations every month, is this something that I want to do? And what am I getting out of it at this point? And, so I kind of knew when I got back from Afghanistan and that was maybe a year before I actually got out, I think. And that at that point I was like, yeah, I just don't see a future that I'm kind of interested in here. So it was like, let's just focus kind of on transitioning out. And probably for the first 6 months of that was sort of just like, I wouldn't say like convincing myself, but just sort of like winding myself out of like trying to be the best soldier I could be, right? It was like, okay, you're transitioning out, your time here's done. Now start figuring out kind of what you want to do. And then the last 6 months of that was like, packing stuff up and attending courses and things like that. And then I think I used like all my remaining leave to like even get out earlier. And then, so it was kind of like that. But I knew about 12 months out, I think, that I was
Yeah,
not going to realize.
that makes sense. And then so you got out. What was that like?
I did. It was interesting. I believe, for me, it was rough, right? And it wasn't rough in the sense of like, I didn't, like I got out and I had no idea what I was going to do, but it was, and I think I'd mentioned this to you previous. I think it kind of separating out from the military, even, doing one enlistment like me, I think it does pose a little bit of like sort of this identity crisis where you're kind of immersed in, this culture of the military. You kind of develop a persona around it, right? It's life. It's 24 hours a day. It's a different lifestyle, right? It's not like a 9 to 5 job that you're like, I'm leaving and I'm going to a new job or whatever. So I think for a while, it was like, for me, it was like, man, who are you now? Like, what are you going to do? That's like, you're not going back. So you got to go forward. And what do you want to be? And I think that was like the biggest transition, was getting away from like the mental aspect of it and the mentality around it, and trying to figure out like what new personality I would take on. Right. And I think that took years, right? Probably, in my opinion. And yeah, I would say that took like 3 years to kind of figure out that I was like, you're not in the army anymore. So, kind of get back into, you know, society and start living. And that's kind of what I did. And originally I decided I was going to go back to school. And I did that. I started at a community college local to me. Didn't know what I was going to study. Wanted to study business because I was like, well, I'll figure something out in that, in that cone. I'll figure out something to do. So I did that, and I ended up transferring to another local university, and was kind of chugging along. And I got a job at working second shift on a manufacturing floor at a company, and was doing that and going to school. And really, the grind of school really kind of just ate me up. And I don't want to say that it was like it was too much or anything. It was just something that the more I did it, the less I found interesting about it. And I was like, this just hard. It's like, this is just, it was, and it's like, I hate to be like one of those people that's like, just do something that you enjoy. But that was kind of my feeling around it. And I was like, I just don't enjoy doing this right now. And so I did a lot, right? I did a lot of school, and I'm close to getting a degree, but I started working and I found way more enjoyment in that. And I started, packing boxes on a manufacturing floor, and I just kind of kept, taking opportunities that were given to me, working hard, and just kind of moving through this organization that I'm still with today, which is wild in today's day and age.
That is wild, man. That is so wild. You went to one place, you're still there. It's awesome.
Yeah. And it's crazy. And like, I work with a lot of like for lack of a better term, like a lot of the older generation who have like been at this company for 20 or 30 years. And like, I guess like next year is 10 years I've been there. Right. And in my time alone, like people from my kind of generation that have come and worked there like 2 years, and then they're like, I'm on to the next thing. And I don't know whether that's like a generational cultural thing. Like I feel like it very much is with like the younger generation, like their attention span, everything is like, I'm on to the next thing. And so I do take a little bit of pride in being like, oh, I've been there 10 years and I like it and I love going to work every day. And it's been an interesting ride, right? It's got ups and downs like everything, but it's been fun and I really enjoy it.
That's what you need. You gotta have fun. You have to enjoy it. I know not every day is milk and cookies and roses, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure, like you said, you enjoy it and it's what keeps you coming back. That's hard for a lot of people. I think veterans actually, in a lot of cases, I think you got lucky. I think you did,
Yeah.
from what it sounds like. Because in a lot of cases, veterans get out. They don't really have that purpose or that mission figured out yet. They just take the first job they can get.
Yep.
And then they're like, man, like there's this entire world out here. I can do anything I want. I'm not enlisted anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have to stay here for 2, 3, 4 years. I can go and do whatever I want. I can change this life that I have, this career that I have. So it's tough to just stand still and stay
Yeah.
put unless you
Yeah.
love
And
it.
and it's interesting, right? Because like I fully agree that it's like you can take the first opportunity, right? And that's kind of like what I did. And I was like, well, let's give it a shot and see what happens. And to your point, like I did get lucky. I ended up finding a really good company, and there's been ample opportunity provided to me. That doesn't come without hard work and being able to perform and succeed. But it's one of those things. It's like if you happen to fall into a situation that works for you and you enjoy it, like make the most of it. And if not, right, I would 100% agree with you that it's like you're not beholden to anything, right? Like always do kind of what you think is best for you. And that is a hard thing because I do think a lot of specifically veterans, like I know they've gotten to this place when they transitioned out. They're like, I took a job and that's what I do now. And, whether they're happy or not, they achieve some sort of objective, right? They can live, they can feed their family, they have a home, right? All of that's good. And so for some people, that's all they need, right? Like, but I would say always kind of keep trying to improve your position if possible and always make sure you're kind of looking out for your own benefit, right? Like always keep improving. And it's a big thing. And if you get stagnant, it can get bad.
That's right. And you said it. Luck doesn't come without hard work. Sometimes you just wake up and you find a $20 bill in your pocket, but usually hard work precedes the luck that comes with it. So, and so that's wonderful, man. What are you working on currently within your organization? What are you amped up about right now when it comes to your career and your immediate focus?
Yeah. So right now I'm working sort of on the commercial side of our business, which is an electronics manufacturing and design company. And so I do a lot of customer interfacing stuff with them right now. And we're kind of as a company in a transitional period. We're an old company, like 80 something years old. Kind of like our new motto is like, we're like an 80-year-old startup. We're transitioning to, what we would call like telematics in the IoT space, right? So we were doing a lot of just like printed circuit board manufacturing, which is kind of like not smart devices. And we're transitioning to, a world of, connectivity, right? Everything's connected to the internet these days. And so we're kind of building our own device portfolio and really overhauling where we want to be in like 10 years. And so I'm really excited kind of about that company-wide transition and being a part of it. It's a space that is generally newer to me, right? I know that, everything is connected these days. We buy a car, it's like you can start it on an app, right? All that stuff. So we're kind of moving fast in that direction, and it's a lot of information. It's a lot of change. And I think transitioning along with that is really good. It's another challenge for me to tackle. And it's cool because it kind of provides a little bit of like that stability where you're at the same organization, but you're tackling all new problems. And for the first time ever, some of them, right? And some of the stuff you're hearing, right? You hear acronyms and stuff for the first time. You're like, I don't even know what that is. I'm going to have to Google that. And that's wild, but it's just fun, man, to like keep learning and progressing and building your skill set and opening up yourself to, a whole new quote unquote world. And so that's where we're at right now. And I'm excited to kind of be on board for that. And it'll be interesting to see the transition and how we ultimately hit our goal and get where we want to be.
That's wonderful. It sounds almost like a new job. It sounds like you've been able to keep things pretty fresh and new as you've been there. So that's wonderful. What about personally? Anything interesting going on in your life? Anything that you're excited to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I've got, I got married in June. So
Congratulations.
Thank you. That was a big thing. And it was exciting. We were living up to that. That was, I got engaged, like, I think right at the end of COVID. So we were apparently, no one got married in COVID and everybody decided they wanted to get married in 2023 or 2022 at the tail end. So like finding a venue was crazy.
That was hard. Yeah. It was hard for a lot of my friends. Yeah.
Yeah, it was wild. So I recently did that. We're going to go on our honeymoon in January to the Bahamas. So I'm looking forward to that. It's kind of the middle of duck season right now. So I've been pretty busy. I haven't been able to get out a lot, but I always look forward to waterfowl season. That's a big thing for me. And then kind of the plan just going forward on a personal level is just keep grinding, right? Keep trying new things, keep making yourself happy. If I ever, I tell myself, it's like, if you ever find yourself in a situation where like you kind of stop waking up and being happy about what you're going to do, then find something different. And I think that could be anything, right? One day you can just be like, hey, this job's starting to wear on me. I gotta start looking for something else or whatever. But you just gotta be able to recognize it. And I think right now I'm in a place where I'm happy and everything's going well. But you don't want to get like complacent. You kind of just gotta keep asking yourself those questions internally and be honest with yourself. And as long as you're honest with yourself, I think you'll get, the answer you're looking for, and you can adjust your plan accordingly.
That's wonderful. Aside from being featured in a podcast like you are right now, is there anything that you're hoping that you can someday accomplish?
Yeah, I think,
It was a total joke.
I think, for me, I like what I kind of ultimately want to do. And we had talked briefly about it is find some way to help transitioning vets out, right? Getting out, finding a job. And I had talked a little bit about, using the company I work for in some capacity to try and do that. Whether, provide opportunities, market more, job postings to veterans, whatever it needs to do. I think, as I kind of have an obligation, I feel like, to help transitioning veterans. I think there were people that did that for me, and I'd like to repay the favor. I think it's kind of a long-term goal, but ultimately, I need to work on that and get people on board at my company to really start seeing some sort of vision like that, where it's like, hey, we got to do more, right? And I think everybody needs to do more, and that's not coming from a veteran. That's coming from, I think, just an American, right? And I think really, if we all think about it and try a little harder and do a little bit better, I think we can make a lot of veterans' lives, way more impactful, way better. And I think that's the ultimate goal. But it is a long road to try and get there. I can't do it overnight, and I'm working on it, but I don't know. Maybe it's a 5 year vision for me right now in terms of working that out with where I'm currently at. And who knows where I'll be in 5 years? So
I think 5 years is still pretty ambitious. It's a wonderful goal to have. It's a wonderful goal to talk about. I think that's something that you and I can continue to have discussions about going forward, and bring the
absolutely.
network in to find ways to help make that happen for you and at your company, or whatever whatever organization you decide to get involved with to help transitioning veterans. I think that's a wonderful cause. So I'm gonna segue into the next that final question that I love to ask. If you could go back in time to a moment in your life when you needed some advice, what moment
Mhm.
would that be, and what would you tell yourself?
Yeah, I would probably. I think to. I would go back to prior to enlistment. I think, and it's not that I think I was just, a 19-year-old kid who didn't listen to the advice that was given to me. And so if I could go back, I would go back to that 19-year-old kid if he would listen, and I would say, "Hey, I think you should do things a little differently, right?" And I don't. It's not a knock on my service or anything like that. I appreciate the time I spent in, but I would have probably gone the more traditional route, like my parents had suggested, and potentially completed school. And then if I had decided that I wanted to um, still do military service, then I would go like the officer route. And I think not because it's like I think it was just it would have been a smarter decision, right? There's always a need for enlisted people, I know, right? But from like a professional and career standpoint, I think it would have been a really interesting box to have checked. Would have been like, oh, I was, an officer in the army, whether it was in the infantry or whatever it may have been. I think that would have been a cool box to have checked in my life. And at this point, I'm 33 years old, and I don't think I'm going to go back, complete school, and get a commission, right? So I think that kind of time has passed. But if I could go back, right, I would say that would have been something cool that I think you would have done, and would have just been interesting. But
What
no
do you think it is
regrets.
about? Yeah, no regrets. But what do you think it is about the that status or that checkbox of being an officer? What do you think it is that you're driven towards with that? Is it leadership? Is it something else?
I think it's just one of those. Yeah, I think it's like a little bit of like that leadership kind of, yeah, right. It's like leadership, but it's like for some reason there's this, I guess for like lack of a better explanation, there's like a stigma around having been an officer in the military and like led people that is somehow, you know, I've had really good officers and I've had really bad officers, but I think they're all kind of judged the same because they all have the same box checked. And it's like, oh, I led men in the military or men or women or whatever. But I think, yeah, it's like one of those things that everybody looks at and like, oh, that's you, that's important. I don't know whether it is or isn't, but it always just seems like it's a very sort of impressive thing to have on your personal or professional resume, right? And
Yeah. No, it's super impressive. I mean, it's so impressive whether you enlist or you're an officer. I felt the same way. I think many times about wishing I could have become an officer someday. I think now being a civilian, talking to officers every day, I realize we are all the same.
yeah,
we, we are all going through the same transition struggles, whether you're enlisted or you're officer. You get a little bit more leadership experience, you have your degree. So, some advantages for sure. But
mm-hmm.
I think ultimately, you get out of the military, we're all still just trying to run that race, figure out that next thing that can get us that next stage in life.
yeah,
But I get it though. I get it. It
yeah,
would have been super cool to be at that level as a leader in the
yeah.
military. So
Yeah, and I think that's like it's like as simple as that. Is like you were here and kind of you were a leader, you were an officer, you had this many people below you, and it's like it's an interesting thing. And I think just like as a really quick like thing to that too, it's like it would have just been cool to be like I'm responsible for this many people, right? Like the pressure, the challenge, all of that would have been like a cool thing to have done. But that's other than that, that's about it. Officers are, they're officers, and like you said, when we get out, we're kind of all the same, right? We all, whether you're in the Army, Marines, Navy, whatever, you guys, we were all in, and now we're all out, and so it is kind of everybody's in a similar position.
it's amazing too when you are up here and all of a sudden it doesn't matter if it's the officer context or you've done something and you've gotten to this level and all of a sudden you leave, you get off of that, you get out of this high point that you're at and you got to start all over again.
Yeah.
And that's certainly a powerful situation to be in and a humbling situation to be in. And I just want to end with this. I remember one of my leading officers would always clog the toilet on the submarine, and I was the one that had to fix it. So,
shocker.
So, but anyway, Patrick, it's been super cool having you on the podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time this morning on the weekend to do that. And again, looking forward to collaborating with you more in the future, especially around those transitioning veteran goals that we both have. So I really appreciate your time, man.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to come on here. Hopefully maybe we can do it again someday. And then obviously, we're stay connected and work together to try and figure out how we can help some transitioning veterans.
Let's do it. Let's make it happen. Let's get that program going and we'll talk about that in the future.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Thanks, brother. As we conclude this episode of Amplify Veterans, I want to emphasize the importance of supporting our veterans in times of need. If you or someone you know is struggling, remember, help is always available. The Veterans Crisis Line provides confidential support 24/7. Reach out to them by dialing 988 and then select option 1. You can also go to veteranscrisisline.net for more information.